I don't want to give anyone that's hearing this the impression that the whole wine industry is evil or is greedy or self-centered. It's just there's a few really bad players here, and they have way too much control over what happens to our land use decisions that are decided at the county level.
Welcome to Edge Talkers. I'm your host, Todd Lennox.
Taoist, Buddhist, Muslim, Jew, Christian, Hindu, chosen few, temple burning, atheism, burning man, paganism.
Those are just a few of the topics we will be discussing and the people we will be hearing from on Edge Talkers.
Dogs and rats, childbearing, those without, single, married, gangs and scouts.
Thank you to Matt Venuti for graciously letting us use his song, The Rhythm of Life, for our intro and outro. You can download this song and check out the rest of his songs and albums at mattvenuti.com. That's MATTVENUTI. And indeed, in this rhythm of life, we are all in this together.
We're all in this, the rhythm of life.
Whether or not you've been lucky enough to visit the Napa Valley, you probably know about its reputation as one of the premier wine-growing regions in the world. From the early mission sacramental winemakers through surviving Prohibition, and on to the now famous Judgment of Paris blind tasting in 1976, when a panel of French wine tasting experts shocked everyone by judging 3 of the top 4 entries from California. Chateau Montelena, Spring Mountain Vineyard, and Chalone Vineyard were instantly famous. The top spot in the red wine tasting, which earned a gold medal, was awarded to 1973 Stag's Leap wine cellars. From that point on, the Napa Valley was booming. But at what cost? As with many other popular tourist destinations, the onslaught of visitors, big business, and the environmental impact of overconsumption has turned this small gem of a natural watershed into a tarnished stone of ecological breakdown. I grew up in Napa when its claims to fame were cow pasture land, dairies, and a state mental hospital on Imola Avenue. The vineyards were present, to be sure, but they were just a part of what I considered to be my podunk hick hometown. I was a wannabe hippie child of the 60s and couldn't wait to get out, packing my backpack and a few dresser drawers of clothes for my dorm room at UC Santa Cruz in 1978. What's happened since I left has been astounding. My uncle, by marriage, Mike Hackett, was settling in just as I had made my escape and has been there through all the incredible growth of not only vineyards and wineries, but hotels, golf courses, and world-class restaurants. Uncle Mike, who enjoys a Rutherford Bench Cabernet Sauvignon as much as anyone I know, isn't against growing grapes. But, as he explains in today's Edge Talkers episode, when the rampant growth encroached his backyard, he took notice, woke up to the destruction of the Napa watershed, and did something about it. I'm proud to introduce you to the wise, yet, as you will surely hear, humble, weathered by political storms, yet deeply spiritual in his outlook on all life, Mother Nature, and humanity, my uncle, Mike Hackett.
I ended up here in Napa Valley because I had grown up in Washington State in a timberland kind of situation, and I grew up as a kid playing in the forest. That certainly was a big part of what makes up who I am. I ended up graduating from college up there, and then it was in 1969, so naturally the United States still had a draft. So rather than going in the Army, and I was a pacifist at the time in my heart, but I didn't have a mentor to teach me, I guess, or to guide me how I might get out of my mandated time in the service. So instead of getting out of the Army, I joined the Navy as a pilot and spent 7 years as a pilot. My last couple of years, 3 years, were spent at Moffett Field, which is part of the, Mountain View, Sunnyvale area, the peninsula of California. And I knew I loved Northern California, but had no idea at that time that because I had never visited wine country, in a way I didn't know it existed. There was a lot less wine consumption in those days as well, certainly on my part. But anyway, I only knew one thing to do, and that was to fly. Really, I had you might say, a master's in flying, and didn't really have, my degree was in journalism, so I didn't go that route. I wanted to continue flying, and the obvious choice was to try to get on with a major air carrier. And that meant that I wanted to stay in the San Francisco Bay Area. We shopped around many, many areas. We drove down south and along the coast, etc. But when we drove into the Napa Valley in 1976, I was just mesmerized with the open space, the beauty. Napa Valley, although a Mediterranean climate, gives the impression that it's very lush because it's irrigated. The vines are irrigated. It very much impressed me, and I thought, well, this is within an hour and a half of San Francisco Airport. I can be an airline pilot out of San Francisco. In those days, there were, before cell phones, but pretty much the same thing. You had to have a beeper, a pager, and I had to be within an hour and a half of the airport in case someone got sick. When your early days, you're kind of on call as an airline pilot. So we found a place in Napa, and couldn't believe how beautiful it was. It's still a very beautiful place, but it's been, in a way, corporatized like many of the other areas that are incredible places to live. Carmel, I'm sure many places on the East Coast as well. Singapore, right? Isn't that a great place to live, I've been told?
Well, that's a whole story in and of itself, but it's a beautiful place, yes, but somewhat like Napa, it's overdeveloped and over-commercialized. So, and like you said, with almost every beautiful spot these days, there seems to be a corporate profit-taking interest that comes in and wants to trade the natural beauty for some bucks. But in Napa, as you know, I grew up in Napa, and yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful spot. I always say I spent the first 18 years of my life trying to get out of there, and I've spent every moment since trying to get back, but it's just a gorgeous spot. When you first moved there, now you met your wife. She was a flight attendant, or?
No, actually, it's embarrassing. At the same time, I'm proud of it. I met her as I was a senior in high school.
Good
she
man.
came in as a freshman in high school.
Childhood sweetheart.
I'm afraid we're guilty of that, but we take pride in it because we're still married to 47 years later, and that's not easy, as we all know. So she's been with me through all of this. She and I got married after I entered the Navy, and had a little bit of training in beforehand, but she came down when we were graduating from flight school. We had what was called a regimental ball, and we dressed up in our Navy dress whites with the sword and all the scabbard and all that, and we were to invite whomever we could. I invited her down. She was living in California at the time. I invited her down, and I said, if you pay your way down, I'll pay your way back. She bought herself a one-way ticket on Braniff, when there was a Braniff. And the week before she was coming down, the water pump went out of my car, and I took her plane money to purchase a new water pump. And so when she got there was no way to buy her a ticket out of there, so she was stuck. But of course, the minute we were together again, it was pretty magical, youthful and in love.
Wow.
And so we got married soon thereafter, right there in Pensacola on the base in a small chapel. And that was in 1970.
Wow, that sounds like a real officer and gentleman ball there with Navy dress uniform and everything. Man, how's she going to resist all that? There's no way.
We do get a kick out of that movie, sure.
I bet you do, yeah.
Obviously, everything's exaggerated, but there's a little truth in all of it as well.
Yeah, cue it up every anniversary.
Yeah.
So you ended up in Napa. When you first moved there, where did you move to? Valley Floor, or?
Yeah, we did. The first thing we did, of course, was to find something to rent. And the Napa Valley was much less built up in those days, especially cities that have become tourist meccas like Yountville and Calistoga. At the time, Yountville was a sleepy little nothing, and we found a rental there. in amongst a vineyard, and we lived there for a while. And we found a rental near the Silverado Country Club in Napa itself. And then at that point, then we started looking for some country property to purchase. And it probably took us 6 months, but we eventually found a parcel that was outside the city limits of Napa, but not too far out on the west slopes. We lived there. We raised our kids there. I guess we lived there from about 1978 to 2000 or something. At any rate, we raised our kids there, and we had a Christmas tree farm there, Choose and Cut. It's called in the States a Choose and Cut Christmas tree farm. Had over 3,000 Douglas firs, which I foolishly kept care of myself for all those years. So I worked for the airline and also had a full-time, part-time job being a Christmas tree farmer, which was really, really fun at Christmas time when we were making sales and families are coming routinely year after year. And you see a couple bring a child, and every year it grows a little bit. It's a really heartwarming, rewarding occupation, or even part-time occupation, but there's no money in it. It did reconnect me with the soil, and I have no regrets about those times. My kids got to grow up in amongst a Douglas fir forest, so there were lots of good things that came out of it.
Yeah, sounds great. Airline pilot by day or by night, and Christmas tree farmer by day. That's
something like that.
Yeah. So now you find yourself in Angwin, California. Yeah. Angwin is a small community, but I was first connected to Angwin because that's where my parents met at Pacific Union College up there at Seventh-day Adventist University. And they have quite a pretty renowned hospital there as well. And Ellen G. White, who was one of the founding prophets or prophetesses of the Seventh-day Adventist religion, lived around there. So I'm quite connected to the Angwin area. And of course, I know you and your family. And it's just a beautiful, bucolic, very peaceful area of the world. And at some point, you became involved because of that environment, I believe. You can tell me, but because of your environment that you're in, somehow that led you into local politics. And maybe you could tell us that story, how it began.
Sure. Obviously, the reason that the majority of the people live, if they're not attached to the college that's here, they live here for the bucolic nature, the rural nature of Angwin. It is nice to say that it, to me, is the jewel of the Napa Valley, and the Napa Valley is a treasure to the United States and the state of California. But we have a combination of tall trees and vineyards. So it gives one the impression you're up in the Sierra Mountains, and yet there's some beautiful vineyards around. We're only up a couple thousand feet, but there is an airport up here, which I connected with. I certainly, my wife and family and I moved here to get away from it all. Napa's a small town, but it was already getting a little busy for us. So we moved up here when I retired from the airline and found a parcel with 3 old cottages on it. I'm a jack of all trades, masters of none, but people would say, oh, you've just bought off on a lifetime worth of work, and they weren't kidding. We have three houses on the property now. All are very nice, but none are complete. So they were right. At any rate, once I got up here, I realized that this was a place I wanted to dig in real deep roots again, and in fact, stay here until I'm gone, till they bury me. And so, people like to think of NIMBY as a bad thing. Well, I am a NIMBY. I do want to protect my backyard. If you don't want to take pride in protecting your own home and the surroundings, then there's something wrong with you. I don't understand how NIMBY is much the same as liberal used to be. Oh my God, you can't say you're a liberal. Well, now everybody's taking a little pride in the L word, I think. At any rate, we moved up here, and the college that was up here decided they would, quote unquote, incentivize their assets. They decided they owned thousands of acres of land up here, and they could sell it to a developer and make several $1 million, and they would be set for a long, long time. There was a community here that was seriously opposed to it because it would have changed the whole nature of Angwin. So we did fight on and off and fight is not too strong a word, not physically, but emotionally, and our soul levels were clashing, that's for sure, about the direction of community up here. Ultimately, they started with wanting to build 1,000 homes up here. Maybe the burr that we stuck in their behinds eventually brought it down to 800, and then 591, and then 380, and then the economy tanked. So maybe we delayed it and the economy screwed it up. But through all that, there was a group formed called Save Rural Angwin, and we were constantly involved with, because Angwin is not a city, not a town, it's a community, but it's zoned ag watershed open space. It's in the county of Napa, not a city. So all of the political decisions that are made here are made at the county level. So we got involved in county politics. I met the most mentor-like person of my life. His name was Volker Eisele, Eisele, and he had been a long-time proponent of open space, agricultural protections, going back 40 years. He was the land use guru that fought harder than anyone here. He did come in post 1968's establishment of the agricultural preserve in Napa County. 51 years ago now, some forward-looking individuals saw that the Napa Valley could only be sustained if there were zoning laws in place which would preclude the splitting of property into small parcels and the commercialization of that area. So they set aside the entire, think of Napa Valley as a bowl. The bottom of the bowl is the ag preserve. That's a zoning designation, and the walls of that bowl are the ag watershed zone. All of the water that transpires, other than rainfall, it transpires down into the ag preserve, comes from the ag watershed. So they established this in 1968. It was the first of its kind, certainly in the United States. I doubt if there are few, but it was very restrictive. And so as a result, 50-some years later, we still have no housing tracts within, obviously there are some within the few cities that are in Napa County, but there's been no change to the value of the property as far as its highest value being in grape growing, wine grape growing. At any rate, that's a long way of saying I met Volker Eisele. He helped establish later on a Measure J, which made it mandated that everything in the ag preserve and the ag watershed, if it were changed, if the land uses was going to change, it would have to go to a vote of the people. That has since been extended through Measure P out to 2050 or something like that. But the point here is that we have really good restrictions on not splitting land in the ag preserve, but the ag preserve, in order to be sustained, needs the ag watershed left alone. Well, just like everywhere else in the world, there's a resource to exploit. And the billionaires want to exploit it. So they want to put vineyards on the hillsides, deforest the oaks and the conifers, and put in vineyards, and that will greatly affect, obviously, the water that goes down into our Napa River. We're one of the few counties in California that has all of our water supply is contained within Napa County. So all the reservoirs are in Napa County. The river originates and empties out, of course, into San Francisco Bay. It flows all the way through Napa County. And so therefore, one can readily understand why leaving the natural environment on the hillsides is vastly important, but we're up against a very, very strong monolith of the wine industry here.
Maybe you could just talk about a few plans that you know about of development on the valley floor and in the watershed area. I've heard rumors of huge multi-acre hotel, golf course. What have you been able to forestall, if not protect so far with some of those plans?
Here's what I see has happened, and it's certainly happened mostly since I arrived, because the wine industry was all inclusive. Everyone helped each other out. The same person that disked the land was the same person that owned the land. Obviously, that has changed. The people that own the majority of the land now don't even live on the land. But you touched on a lot of issues because of the popularity of wine and tourism. And so we have beauty because the hills are mostly treed. We have, world-class wine. Certainly we are as good a wine as you can find anywhere in the world, or that's for sure. And so as a result, we become a destination, a worldwide destination. We have, I think it's 3.8 million visitors a year, growing by about 10% every year. Same roads we had in the 1950s. Some places they've added a little turn lane, but we have traffic issues now, really bad traffic issues in the morning and afternoon. That's a sad state of affairs. But we have the problem is that's multifaceted. We're building hotels to accommodate those visitors. It's rampant in Napa. They've built too many hotels in Calistoga. St. Helena is trying to hold the line. Yountville is just a tourist trap. Many fancy high-end hotels and restaurants. So we have beautiful restaurants. It's a great place to visit. I still love living here, but there are issues. What has happened is the quality of life has been usurped from the people who live here because of the bias of our governmental agencies. They are, especially the county and the city of Napa, grown. City of Napa, you know more than anyone, Todd, that the city of Napa looks little downtown like it did when you were a kid growing up.
Oh, it's amazing.
There must be 50 high-end restaurants and several thousand hotel rooms, and there seems to be no end in sight. They keep approving hotels. All the time we're sharing the same water resource, There's no more water falling, but we got more straws into the aquifer.
All in this, yeah, we're all in this together.
Several Angwin representatives were called to the home for dinner of the new president of the college, during which he thanked us for stopping them from selling away their most valuable asset, their land. He thanked us because now they have a sustainable future. They're going to lease some of their land instead of sell their land. But instead of them drawing up the wagons around themselves, they're trying to become more inclusive and including the community and actually I've just been interviewed a couple of times now by people that are doing resource studies about how they need to interact with the community better. So everything is really good in Angwin. I met that Volker Eisler. He turned me on to politics. Little did I know that one day, 3 years ago now, just before he passed away, he and I were having a glass of wine at his home, and he said, we protected the ag preserve almost 50 years ago. Now we need to protect the ag watershed. I really wasn't involved enough to really know what he meant. But then he passed away, and a large number of, you might call neighborhood environmental groups who are all operating independently, all of a sudden saw, there's a lot of groups just like us. We have problems on Soda Canyon Road. We have problems in Angwin from developers. We have trouble along Dry Creek Road, Coombsville, Carneros, all these different regions. We're all having their quality of life usurped through too much expansion of the wine industry. I hate to call it all wine industry problems because we're going to have people growing cannabis here very soon, and they're going to want that same resource of water. And but there's not much grazing going on anymore. There aren't any more peach trees. We have a monoculture here. It is wine, grapes. And whenever you have that, if you can study world history in any way, you get one crop and you have too many tourists coming in. Just take a look at Greece is a great example, some of those areas. Pretty soon the quality of life of the citizens goes down, and then it's a whirling dervish of problems.
The powers that be seem to be only able to think of the next quarter in terms of future thinking and forget about a year or 10 years from now, let alone their children and children's children. There's just no thought almost given to any of that. But I wonder if we could focus a little bit on why what is a watershed, and what is so important about protecting a watershed?
Yeah, I mean, it really is obviously a worldwide issue. You know, you're deforesting for palm oil over in your region of the world, right?
No, yes.
And other things. When you're taking out trees for agriculture, it directly relates to the climate crisis, as you call it, not climate change. We're in a crisis, and we needed to act 10 years ago, and we didn't even meet our goals. You may have read we didn't even meet our emissions goals in the United States last year. Pretty pathetic. But in the Napa Valley, we feel it's very important to showcase the Napa Valley because it is a worldwide wine growing region. And so what we do here, if we can have environmentalists and the industry stand together to accomplish a sustainable watershed, that would be great. The watershed is basically, in this case, is where it's no secret if you've taken basic science in high school that trees attract water. They transpire, yes, but they also send that water down into the roots. They send their roots down, and the way it captures the rain better than obviously an empty field, it lets that rain slow down. Instead of beating, seriously beating on the soil, it drops to the leaf litter. It then sinks slowly like a sponge into the macropores, they're called. They're just the little fissures that are in the non-permeable soil. It passes through those macropores, and that's how it gets into the aquifer, and that's how it transfers down into the ag preserve from our hillsides. Remove the trees. I don't think I need to go into the science of that. Everybody knows you remove the tree and all of that has changed. They rip the soil, all of the soil texture has changed. Now you get more runoff, way more runoff. And of course, couple that with climate change and firestorms, you get a real combination of a lot more water going downhill all at once instead of spread out. And we have problems in our reservoirs because of the nutrients, the negative nutrients and the sediment that's coming out of the vineyards that are above our reservoirs. We have a tremendous problem with fish, the lack thereof in the Napa River, because it's supposed to be a gravel bottom. That's where the steelhead and the salmon come in and lay their eggs in that rock litter, but they can't do that anymore because it's all full of sediment. The river has been terribly incised. So we've got reservoir problems. We've got flooding problems sometimes. We just had tremendous fires, as everyone in the world knows, because we have unmanaged forests and we have more people living in the forested area. So that's another problem. So you got too many people, an industry that's only interested in the bottom line. Not everyone. I don't want to give anyone that's hearing this the impression that the whole wine industry is evil or is greedy or self-centered. It's just there's a few really bad players here, and they have way too much control over what happens to our land use decisions that are decided at the county level.
First of all, that's just a great explanation of why the watersheds are important. I appreciate that. And I was listening to a podcast, I think, with Charles Eisenstein. Do you know Charles? Or have
I do not, no.
Yeah, I think you'd be really interested in his latest book. It's called Climate, A New Story. But basically, it's about falling in love with the living earth again, reconnecting not only just with the earth, but with each other, because a lot of the issues that we see today are a result of us not being connected to nature or each other. So we end up substituting money and power and fame and food and you name it. You know, our basic economic system is based on replacing our connection with nature with transactional type relationships. But he was talking on a podcast with someone that's into land regeneration, and the whole crux of it is if you can just slow the water system down using the trees, as you talk about with the transpiration and also the sequestration that trees provide, and then the watersheds, you just kind of slow it down. You know, you don't need massive amounts of rainfall. You just need the local normal rainfall. Even in semi-drought areas, there's enough rain if you could just kind of slow the water down enough so it doesn't just run off. Some of what you're saying is quite frightening, because I hear you saying that a lot of this is, I wouldn't say you're saying it's too late, but I'm sort of inferring that it's too late on some of these issues. I want to bring your spirituality, and I know you're a practicing Buddhist, and it seems like that's connected here too. Like how do we keep going in the face of this? Seems like you said, we're not where we're supposed to be now, and it doesn't look like it's getting much better. If you turn on the news, it doesn't look like it's getting much better. It can easily look like it's too late. And how do you deal with that as a person, as a Buddhist, in your thinking of spirituality and our earth?
That's a really salient question here, especially for me. And of course, I'm only speaking from my point of view. Clearly, I would not have gotten into this if it hadn't been for Buddhism, and I would not have been able to stay with it and to be as determined without Buddhism. It is a big part of it, because the basic tenets of all Buddhists is self-reliance. You have to care about others, but you have to be responsible to take action yourself. You can't expect someone else to do it. You have to do it yourself. You can't just do your best. Doing your best isn't enough. What I really feel is you never give up. You never give up. That's more than doing your best. That's what I've learned. So I also believe that we're all connected. The fish and the trees and the soil, and you and I, although we're 5,000 miles apart, I can reach out and touch you right now, right? I mean, makes me, I'm a little tearful seeing you, because it's so nice to be with you.
Wow.
So, and I guess another sort of Buddhist philosophy that pertains to this is realizing that just because one practices Buddhism doesn't mean the problems are going to go away. The obstacles in life will still appear. And in fact, probably the more spiritual one becomes, the greater one toils to overcome obstacles. It was certainly exemplified in my plight, if you will, with this watershed protection initiative. Once Folker died, well, I became clearly aware of what he was talking about, because there was every week, every month, there would be something in the newspaper about somebody else doing another timber harvest plan or timber conversion plan. In other words, timber or forested area to grapes. The funny thing in California is a catch-22 is that, like Washington and Oregon and California, for that matter, thinks of trees as crops to be turned into lumber and more trees planted. So therefore, there aren't the adequate protections for trees in California that there should be. Slightly more protection for oaks, but very little for softwood. So at any rate, I met another guy, another fellow that was more of a scientific mind than I, Jim Wilson. This was in 2015, and he was very much interested in the same thing, coming at it from another more scientific state of mind. He's also a spiritual guy, much like I. And we joined forces together, and the two of us started in 2015 to put an initiative. It's called a Citizens Initiative on the ballot in California. It was called the Water, Forest, and Oak Woodland Protection Initiative of 2016. And the two of us went out. The way it's done is you get a lawyer to draw it up, and you get a title and summary together. You submit it through the county processes. You're given, I think, 60 days to go out and collect a certain percentage of the votes of the last election. It was like 4,000. The number is not as important as realizing that Jim and I started off on this, with two of us collecting signatures. Before we were done, 8 weeks later, we had 82 people collecting signatures. That was heartwarming.
That's awesome.
It was also a tremendous relief of anxiety. Long story short, that when the county found a perceived legal flaw in it, they would not put it on the ballot. We took it to the appellate court and ultimately to the Supreme Court. And in a split decision, we lost at the Supreme Court. And that one was a real learning process.
Wow.
As we came back a year later to started doing it again, we got some people within the wine industry very involved. Names like Warren Winiarski, who is in the Hall of Fame of California. He started Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. He was responsible for producing the wine that won at the Tasting of Paris in, not sure what year, that was 76 maybe, something like that. He's a real VIP, but he loves Napa Valley. He loves it. He wants to sustain it. He wants to see it here for his grandchildren and the unborn. And the term, this is a national treasure, I give to him. He's one guy. Andy Beckstoffer is another name that's very well known internationally, even I would say, because he's the largest vineyard owner in Napa County, and he's branching up into Lake County, and started the grape growers lobbying group, and he's quite a guy. Other names are Robin Lale, John Daniels' offspring, Randy Dunn, a boutique winemaker from Angwin called Dunn Vineyards, Beth Novak Milliken of Spotswood fame, Bob Dwyer. Anyway, I'm talking about people when I should be talking about the issue. Is that I guess I am the glue that holds those people together. I kind of got them all together, got them fashioned into a group. They're called the Growers Vintners for Responsible Agriculture. They helped support another initiative in 2018. It was somewhat different than the one in 2016, but same idea, signature collection, take it to the people, and ultimately got it on the ballot. The wine industry, without question, was tremendously against it. They love the status quo, and they put up 3 times as much money as we gained. So, unfortunately, about politics, oftentimes it's a high percentage. I think it's like 83% of the time the one with the biggest bank account wins. It's no different in this case, but it was a really nasty, contentious campaign. Of course, I'm one-sided in this, but most of what they proclaimed to be against Measure C, it was Measure C, and our initiative was Measure C, Watershed Protection Initiative. They said it would increase traffic. No, it wouldn't do that. They said it would cause more hotel building on the hillsides. No. They made false claims. It was a very, I hate to say it, but it was a very right out of Trump's playbook.
Yeah.
Say an fact long enough, and pretty soon people start to believe it grows its own legs. And that's the truth. And then they outspent us, but we lost by less than 1%. So they had barely over 18,000 voters. We had over 17,999. So very much a toss-up. They did win, but it didn't go away. And so everyone in the community knows that we're expected to come back with another initiative in 2020. And so there is current action going on at the governmental level, and I could launch into that if you don't want to talk about anything else. If you want me to finish the story, I could bring you up to date, or we can talk about something else.
Let me have you talk about that. I just have a question to interject here. So Measure C, that was a local or a countywide?
Countywide, yes.
Yeah, so
countywide measure.
Measure C, that's the one, you got on the ballot in 2018, and I was following the results that night. That was really the one election in 2018 that I was really following the most. So disappointing. It's almost more disappointing that you lost by so little, just almost there, and knowing that you lost because they had the money to spout out a bunch of lies and pay for them to be on billboards and TV and whatnot, and you have to really pick and choose where you're putting your money because the media costs money.
Yeah. And
then to have it narrowly lose by that small amount. And obviously most of the citizens aren't getting the message, because if they really got the message, they would it's in the Napa citizen's best interest, your average citizen, to protect their own environment.
That's right. But, if you have the government, the elected officials saying, no, this is bad, if you have huge money against you and they control the media, I think we did pretty darn well.
Yeah.
But we did not win, and so there's lots left over to do.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I say about Buddhist, about never giving up.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I've been down twice here now,
Yeah.
and I didn't tell about the collaboration with the Napa Valley Vintners on this 2018 thing, which is another whole story. That one really is distasteful. But
yeah. Well, actually, if you wouldn't mind telling that story, because I think that's a good story.
Yeah. Okay. When in 2017, after the loss of the other initiative not making the ballot, got kind of a cold call from the representative of the staff at the Napa Valley Vintners. That's a large industry lobbying group here in Napa with represents about 550 different wineries. But I got a cold call and they said, we're going to invite you and the grape growers of Napa County and the wine growers and the Farm Bureau. We're going to get you all in one room and maybe we can collaborate on something, because we do feel that there could be room for enhanced watershed protections in Napa County. So we met with all those groups, just an informal luncheon, and it was cordial, and we got to get our point across, and it was well received, it appeared. But when I left, I thought, well, that's the end of that. That was nice. But within about a week, I got another call from the Napa Valley Vintners, and they say it became obvious to us after that meeting and conversations that if there's going to be any kind of collaboration, it has to be a relatively small group. And so we want to meet with you, and we'll let everybody else know if we can reach some kind of conclusion. So we met a couple times a month, somebody 3 times a month for about 6 months. And at the end of that 6-month period, in August of 2017, we had a collaboration. In fact, we went down together and issued it to Napa County for their review. 2 representatives from the Napa Valley Vintners and my partner in this, Jim Wilson. And it was right around September 1st, within 1 week, those loud voices within the wine industry, is the one that I've alluded to before, that are the greedy type, were screaming at the Napa Valley Vintners, split their board. Their board reversed a position that they had voted unanimously on 4 and 5 times, one of which, of course, was when we completed the narrative and took it into the county. So they completely reversed their position. They pulled their funding from it. And these were people, not that the few individuals that I had been working with directly, but the industry as a whole turned them against us. They put in, instead of supporting us, they put in themselves $200,000 against us. So it was like a real betrayal of the worst kind. Obviously, friendships, a friendship kind of betrayal would be worse. But this was quite the betrayal. And so we not only had to fight all the other industry, but we had to fight the group with whom we designed the initiative.
That's just a real body blow. And didn't you make some concessions to them in order to have their full support as well? A few.
Well, even after that, that's, of course, we did make concessions during the collaborative process.
Yeah.
What our product was a collaboration. We made concessions. Yeah. They made some in the numbers. And even after we took it in the collaborative edition, and they started going sideways, we made a couple of, I would have to call them non-substantive changes, though, to reassure those that were opposed to it that if they had their vineyard in there and the setback from a stream wasn't enough, they could their vineyard. In other words, this was prospective, and no one was going to be hurt that already had a vineyard in. But these initiatives were about protection of the tree canopies, about protection from the streams, both class 1, 2, and 3 streams. That's streams that run year-round, intermittent streams, and ephemeral streams that only run part of the year in the wintertime when it's running a lot. Those obviously carry the same nutrients and same sediment, same pesticides, same fungicides down into the river and into the reservoirs that the bigger rivers do. So water flows downhill, but they fail to recognize that. So we concluded that in that initiative that we would have to eventually totally stop deforestation in Napa County. But we were allowed them, one of our concessions was to have it, what I would classify a soft landing. We were going to let the county, or developers, not the county, but the county would let developers take out 795 more acres of forested land for conversion to vineyard, and that would be it. But, that was just one that was turned against us. Oh, they're going to allow 795 more acres to be taken. So it threw it back in our face, flipped the coin, and that was used against us. So never again. So we have anyway, that's what happened with the vintners.
Wow. So they used some of the concessions that you gave them against your initiative, saying you were giving away too much.
Yes, that's correct.
Pretty much it. That's just such a low blow. I mean, come on. Dirty. Wow. Yeah, so let me ask you, what's the difference? So you're going to have a ballot on what, 2020?
3 months ago, our congressman, long time, I think he's almost 30 years, congressman from this area, Mike Thompson, I got a copy of a letter that said, I believe, and of course I'd had a private conversation with him prior to this, so I kind of knew where he was coming from, but he said, I'd like to join a group to work on watershed protections. I will lead it. I will be the facilitator, and I'm going to invite the mayors from the cities within Napa because they care about their reservoirs and their water supply. I'm going to invite 2 supervisors who are really responsible for taking action at a governmental level. And then they invited 2 representatives from the previously mentioned growers, vendors for responsible agriculture. So Warren Winiarski and I attended. Later on, Beckstoffer went. My partner Jim Wilson went to one meeting. And then we had 2 representatives from the Napa Valley Vintners, the wine growers of Napa Valley, the Napa County Farm Bureau, and the grape growers, Napa County grape growers. So it was quite a room. And after the session got going, I'll never forget Congressman Thompson. I have eternal respect for him. He stood up. He said, "The time for more data collection and science gathering has long since passed. I, too, see the need for watershed protections, and the county government isn't doing it. So I'm bringing you all in here so you can work together to try to do some collaboration. And when we leave here, I want the supervisors to go back to the county, join their other 3 supervisors, and to do something about this. It shouldn't have to be the citizens' initiative doing it. It should be a governmental action." So we met 4 times. At the end of that, we gave our 9 points to the group. It was met with stoic quiet, I guess. I don't know how to. They didn't say anything. And it's 8 weeks after the end of those meetings. They've still not said anything. But it did force the county supervisors to, as part of a strategic plan, to talk about and to prioritize watershed protections. So we've lobbied as hard as we can, and we have convinced them at least to discuss this on this coming Tuesday before the Board of Supervisors. We're going to agendize the watershed protections for Napa County to see if they will do an ordinance. The 5 of them can make land use decisions on their own. It would be called an initiative. If citizens got together and put it on the ballot, that would be called an initiative. The only difference between the 2 is they can subordinate. They can change an ordinance because they enact the ordinance. And why initiatives are deemed by some in government unfair, because the government has 0 control over any changes to a citizen's initiative. So they're much more powerful. We're okay if they do an ordinance, and we've been in discussions with them privately, 1-on-1, 2-on-1, 2-on-2, and we'll find out Tuesday. I'm the biggest cynic around, so another thing, I don't want to I don't want to say anything negative because I don't want to be, I would like to remain positive until proven otherwise. But Tuesday, they're going to talk about slope, not planning over 30% slope, about what we've input a few points to them. We want 90% of the tree canopy remain in the ag watershed zone. We want 3-to-1 mitigation. Mitigation meaning if you took out, for example, to simplify, you take out 1 acre of trees, you'd have to either preserve or replant 3 acres for every one you take out. That mitigation should have to be on the same property, which would further limit, as you can see, deforestation of that parcel. We have established some barriers, of 500-foot barriers around our reservoirs, no-touch zones, you might call them. We're determining that water quality buffer zones should be permitted, or mandated is a better word, along all of our streams. So big stream, 125 feet away. Middle-sized stream, the intermittent stream, 75 feet. Small streams, stay back 35 feet. That'll keep the sediment and the nutrients, the negative nutrients, out of that stream. And therefore out of our river and out of our reservoirs. And then, of course, we've input some ideas on the best way for the governance of those issues. In other words, we'd like them to not be able to change the ordinance later on. We'd like to input something into the ordinance that disallows them to do it, or at least incentivizes them taking great strides before they do it. And then we want things monitored. We want to know if somebody is allowed to put in a vineyard, like the Walt Ranch project in the Eastern Hills, that we know what is coming out of that vineyard beforehand and what's coming out of that vineyard after they plant it. And then we'll have a much better idea in a few years. And back to your idea of, you said it's probably too late. Well, one thing is for sure with a water supply, it's too late when you find out it's too late. It's already too late. And they've run into that situation in other areas of California, of course, the San Fernando Valley, but even down in the wine growing region around Santa Maria and San Luis Obispo area and all of that.
Yeah.
They've run out of water there. They're having real problems here already. They didn't quit deforestation soon enough.
Well, first of all, just hearing you talk about everything that's coming and what you're working on and what's going to happen possibly on Tuesday, I imagine you're still hopeful and cautiously so, but even with places that have lost their water, there's still hope there too. I mean, even here in Malaysia, there's a group going around they actually started in Brazil with something called agroforestry, and they've been able to take desertified land and turn it back into what it once was, which is kind of oasis or oases of trees and co-cropping and agriculture to bring back the rain and bring back the water. So it's not all lost. And one of the things I think is human beings are an integral part of the earth. A lot of people say, well, the earth will survive, humans will be wiped out, and the earth will go on. And I think we're here for a reason. The earth grew us for a reason. We're like trees, except we can walk around, But
I agree with you, Todd.
Yeah, so she's asking us to help her. And it's a real chance for us to be co-evolutionary partners with the earth and part of the earth. I mean, you said you were getting teary-eyed before, and I'm just like, I just want you to know how appreciative I am of what work you're doing and your partners are doing, and the people of Napa, who I know really are supportive of what you want. They just don't, a lot of them don't know it yet, but if they get the right information and realize the true impact, they will know it. And just so thankful for what you're doing, and I miss you, and I love you, and I'm really proud of having you be my uncle and warrior in Napa, fighting the good fight. And I imagine it sometimes feels like a struggle, but it's also, there's a lot of love and just joy and and beauty mixed in with that struggle. I mean, it's all kind of one big awesome feeling of like having a purpose that is serving this earth.
Yeah, once I could never be a politician, and here I am in politics. But as a politician, you have to sell oneself. I don't have to sell anything about except the protections for our water resource.
Yeah,
But I feel very much the same way as you. And yeah, there's been a lot of pains along the way. But you know, you meet. I know you understand this. All of these. Literally, I could say hundreds, I might even say thousands, but I'll just say hundreds of people who are like-minded that have been supportive and generous and admirable, and people that I have learned to care about. I would have never met them. So there is a little, if you want to call that a selfishness, I guess it is. That's the good part. If, though, at the end of the day, I haven't given up and I've gotten a victory, then I've done something for future generations. It won't change my life one bit. And I think most of the people that are in this kind of thing are in it for the future.
Yeah,
the future of the planet. It's not cliche. We are in a crisis where the future of our planet and our ability to live on it is. We're at the pinnacle of that right now, and we need to take action now. And you know, the problem is with the people that aren't educated is because in a practical sense, in the United States, for sure, most cases it takes two people to make a living to be able to sustain a normal quality of life. So you have a mother working, a father working, they get up early, they feed their kids, take the kids to school, go to work themselves, come home dog-tired, fix dinner, help the kids with their homework. Maybe they get a little bit of time together, and then it's all over again the next day. And I have tremendous empathy for people that I guess I'm saying, just between you and me, I used to be a little bit angry with people because they weren't getting involved. They weren't paying attention. And it's through that the people like Trump get into power. But they're just doing their life, man. They're doing the best they can.
yeah,
And I have the advantage right now of I guess you would say, having a spiritual outlook about the connection with every living thing. And I'm also retired, so I have some more time than I don't have to do this. I do this because I want to.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I've sort of swung that pendulum myself of, I used to think, oh, people are just such idiots, they're they're idiots. I would call people idiots all the time. And now I realize, no, I mean, everybody's really, with the very few exceptions of maybe some sociopaths and psychopaths, which is a minuscule proportion of humanity, everyone's doing the best they possibly can, given their where they were born, their history. And like you said, they got to go to work and they got to come home and they got to feed their kids and all of that. I mean, yeah. So there's some system-wide changes that need to happen there. But as a fellow napkin, as we are somewhat ironically self-named, I really appreciate what you're doing there, and any support that you need from me in terms of getting the message out or anything you need from me, Mike, don't hesitate to ask.
Well, see that you just showed yourself as a prime example of what the kind of people I'm talking about. You're like-minded, you're spiritual, you get the connection. You get the connection between us, but you get the connection with the earth as well. And so very touching, and thank you very much.
This podcast will be published about a week after the Tuesday vote that Mike referred to in our podcast. And let me read an email about the results of that vote from Mike. He says, the Board of Supervisors proposed an ordinance that is at best a halfway measure. Specifically, they are proposing that 30% of our forest is okay to develop. In this age of climate crisis, we need to let our trees grow old. The services they provide to the planet are immeasurable. And so the labor of love continues for Mike and the people in Napa Valley. If you'd like to get involved, you can visit either on Facebook or Google Napa Vision 2050 or Protect Napa Watersheds.
We are all in this together. All in this together. We're all in this together. All in this together. All in this. All in this together. All in this. Yeah, we're all in this rhythm of